Hi, I'm Brian, or Fat Dad from Fat Dad's Woodshop. Jewelry is not something that most people think of when they think of woodworking, but I'm going to show you in this video some techniques for making something like a wooden ring. Fat Dad Woodshop. Now, these rings are made out of solid wood. There are kits out there where you can buy like a metal ring and then you put a wood veneer over top of the metal ring, and those are great if that's what you want to do. But I'm making solid wood rings, and these are not as durable as say a metal ring is, but it's just a fun little project that you make. And one of the best parts about these kind of things is that they use very little wood. What you end up having to do is, if you could take a piece of wood, just a solid piece of wood, and cut a hole in it and shape it like a ring, but that would make the ring very weak because wood is only strong in certain directions. It's strong when you're compressing the grain, but if you push it apart, it'll break right apart, especially when you're making something as small and thin as a ring. So what you actually end up having to do is make a piece of kind of plywood as your blank. And I'll show you how that's done. It's actually an ancient technique where they would, you take thin strips of wood, you glue them together with the grain crossing itself, and it makes a very, very strong piece of blank, even when you cut it to something like this thin. So what I've got here for this blank is I've got a piece of ash and a piece of walnut, and I've got the thin strip jig that I made and used in an earlier video for the veneer bending, and I'm going to use that to cut myself a couple of thin strips off of these two small blanks. And you don't need a lot of wood to make something like this. So if you happen to be somebody that has a whole bunch of exotic wood blanks laying around that are just too small to be using for other projects, this is a great project to use up some of that stuff. So we'll get these cut, and then I'll show you how you build your blank. So now that I've got my wooden pieces that I've cut off of those strips, I've got them cut into roughly squares, all about the same size, and I'm going to build my blank. And there's something you really should understand about the way this works is you want to cross the grain when you build the blank, and I always build it on a sacrificial piece of wood. This is a piece of tamarack that I've got laying around. You do that so when you drill the hole through this, you're not blowing a bunch of material out of the bottom side, and it makes it a little bit easier. So I don't know if you can see the grain on this piece of walnut, but it's running the same direction as the tamarack. And then I'm going to do two pieces of walnut. So I'm going to cross the grain, and what I'm going to do is just turn it about 45 degrees, cross the grain that direction. Then I'm going to put my piece of, this is ash, and I'm going to set that going crossways. And then my next piece of walnut will be this way, and then this one will be the same direction as the first piece. And this makes a very strong piece of plywood that I will then be able to drill through. I'll have this nice long blank to be able to hold on to while I'm drilling through it with the drill press, and I will be able to control that. And then I will sand this piece off once my blank is cut down to size more. Now, after you've got the hole drilled, these are blanks that I made earlier, and I'm going to actually do this with one of these because I've already glued this up. I glue this up with Titebond 3 because it's a waterproof glue. Now, don't think that these rings are waterproof. Think of them more as water resistant. I actually even take mine off whenever I wash my hands. These are not as durable as metal rings, but the good news is that if you do break or lose one of these things, it doesn't take a lot of wood for you to just make a new one. So that's just a thought. But I'm going to, this is one I'm making for my daughter. It's got ebony and mahogany and maple in it. I would use almost always hardwoods. I cut this I drilled this hole out here on the back end of this and had her try on the ring to see if it fit her finger. Sizing is somewhat important. Your initial hole, you want to go a little bit small, and then you want to sand the inside of this out. If you have a spindle sander, it works really well for sizing that out until it slides onto the finger well, so that you can get it on and off, because you don't want to have your finger stuck in one of these rings. That would be uncomfortable. And the way that we shape this after that is we build one of a jig like this. This holds the inside of the hole on the blank, and you put this on, and then it sits in the lathe, and this part is cut and spreads out. I've got a bigger one here that we did for a thermos. You can see these cuts in here, and then the tailstock shoves into this hole. It makes these slots spread out and hold the inside of that hole, so you can shape the outside of the ring. And we've done this several times. I did this in a video for the lighter that I did. It's this basically the same technique. These jigs are really easy to make. They're really quick to make. And what I often do is I'll take a tiny little piece of sandpaper and just stick that on there. And then when I run this on and this spreads out, it's got a little bit more grit to hold on to your ring blank when you're spinning that in the lathe, and it holds nice and solid for you. Now, one possibility that you want to always consider is sometimes when you're using a lot of these really hard woods, that if you're overly aggressive with the cut, your blank can blow apart, and you'll just have to start over again, because that's the way it goes. But you're not wasting a lot of wood. Even if you fail twice for every one of these that you make, you're still not using up a lot of your wood. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're doing this. So I'm going to build this blank, but I'm going to actually use this one, because this one will be dry, and then we'll be all set. So I've got my blank all clamped up in my drill press here, and I've got a 3/4 inch Forstner bit that's going to drill right through the blank and into this sacrificial piece that also works well for a handle. 3/4 of an inch is around 8 to 8.5 on the ring size. I already tested this out on my daughter. That fits her finger, so we're going to use that size to drill her ring. Now, if you don't have the exact size for your Forstner bit for the ring size that you're looking for, you can take the spindle sander and you can ream out the inside of the ring. You would just leave the ring a little bit fat, and you can ream out the inside of the ring with your spindle sander and just work it out until it fits who you're trying to fit this to. And if you're ever drilling ebony, you should know that it is hard and it smokes a lot when you're cutting it. And now that you can see that this is drilled all the way through, all this blowout is in the sacrificial piece and not actually in my ring blank. And I've got a nice clean hole going all the way through the blank. And here's the blank. And now I've got a little bit more work to do on this to get this on the lathe. But essentially what will happen is that I'll take my collet here, put a little piece of sandpaper on there, squeeze this on, and that will hold it nice and tight while I turn that. So I'll meet you back at the lathe. So now I have my blank, and as you see, I've got all that sanded off. All that tamarack is now sanded off, and I'm going to attach this to my collet, which I made. And you can see more on how to make these collets in the lathe tool video that I did, where I made that cigar lighter. And I'm going to put this between centers, and I've got this so that the tailstock fits in that little hole in the end of the collet, and tighten this down. And I'm just going to snug this bugger up a little bit so that I'm sure that this won't spin on the collet. And then I'll bring my tool rest in here, and as always, I'll spin this by hand and make sure that that does not hit anything. And then I'm going to, using a very light touch, I'm going to start rounding this over, and I'm going to start rounding it over very, very lightly. I just want to barely touch it, because with these sharp angles and everything. And the key to working this blank is that you want to cut very slowly because you are using fairly thin material. You don't want to get aggressive with this or you're going to blow it apart for sure. And even if you do everything right, you might blow it apart anyway. So we're just going to take very, very small passes. We're not going to get aggressive. We got all day to get this done. And we're just going to work this until it's round. Okay, now I've got this good and round, and it looks pretty good. Now, it's still fairly thick to be a ring, but this is the part where you would basically shape this to whatever shape you want it to be. Now, I'm going to switch. I was using this roughing tool, which is pretty good, but I'm going to switch to something less aggressive. I'm going to use a smoothing tool here. You could use that, or maybe even this little round tool, because the round tool only touches it in just one little spot, so you can kind of just round this over or make whatever shape you want it to be. But you're going to want to be very non-aggressive when you're working this thing, because you don't want to really be pushing hard in there, because this is going to get thinner and thinner. And the heck of it is, the heartbreaking part of this is that it's going to be its most fragile when you're almost done. So if you're going to blow it apart, it'll be when you're almost done, and then it'll blow apart. Now, a lot of the shaping on this, I will actually switch to sandpaper. And another technique that you might want to do is, instead of cutting close to this tailstock, I might do one side of this ring and then flip the ring over in the collet and do the other side, so that I'm always working on this side and I'm not working next to that spinning metal there. So here we go. And as you can see, I'm just taking small amounts off at a time. There is no reason to be in a big rush. We don't need to take, we don't want to be taking large amounts of this ring off at any one time. But you do want to get it thin enough so that it's comfortable on the finger that you're putting it on. Now, another thing that you can do as you're getting this down to the shape that you want it to be, you can actually take this off the collet and have the person who's going to receive the ring actually come and try it on a little bit. Just make sure you don't cram it onto their finger and let it get stuck on there. So if it doesn't feel like it's going to go, don't shove it on. But if it's getting close and you want to get this thin enough so that it's comfortable to wear in between your fingers, but you want that to be something that the person that's receiving the ring is going to find comfortable. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to switch from my tools to sandpaper, and I'm going to start bringing this down with a coarse sandpaper in order to get this to the size that I want, because I really don't want this to explode now. Now that I've got this to the size and shape that I really wanted, I'm going to start using higher and higher grits and work my way up to the smoothness that I'm going to want for this ring. As you're doing this, it's a good idea to stop in between each grit. You don't have to sand for very long, but stop in between each grit and make sure you're not putting long lines in this, and you want to make sure that you're being very careful to not just leave the sandpaper in one space. Keep that sandpaper moving so that you're not creating groove marks in the ring. And now I've got this pretty shiny. I've got this down to about 400. For the purposes of the finish I'm putting on this, 400 is really all that's necessary. And what I'm going to do is do some hand sanding here, and I'm just going to put like a little round over bevel just by hand on the outside edges of this ring, and I'll also sand these outside edges by hand down to 400 as well, and then I'll sand the inside of this ring so that it'll look. And now I've come over here to the spindle sander, and I have to take the top nut and washer off of the spindle sander in order to fit this ring on here. This is the smallest one that we've got, and I've got to put that on there and screw this down. That's almost a little bit of a pain in the butt to have to do that every time. But all I'm going to do is just give this a very light smoothing, and I'm going to chamfer or round over the inside of this ring just a little bit to make it a little bit more comfortable for the wearer. So I'm going to hold this off the sandpaper and then start this up, and then just give this a very light sanding all the way around. And then I'm going to just tilt this ever so slightly. And give the inside of that ring just a little bit of a chamfer. And now is definitely the time where you want to have your person come and try on the ring and make sure that it fits them. And now, after some hand sanding and some Danish oil, I chose Danish oil on this, but you can certainly put whatever kind of finish you want on it, lacquer or polyurethane or what have you. But I chose the Danish oil because it's a nice, easy thing to put on there. And I'm just going to let this dry. And of course, after you get that ebony dust all over everything, because that gets everywhere. But then this will go to my daughter as just a ring that she can have. And that's how you do that. So have a good day. Pet Dad Woodshop.